welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in the month of March. So the first 3 books I read in the month of March were for a vlog where I read the, objectively speaking, some of my favorite booktubers' favorite books. I basically picked books that were mentioned repeatedly on some of my favorite booktubers' best of 2020 lists. They were The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I also read The House in the Cerulean Sea. I think I gave this one 5 stars. And then The Song of Achilles, also a 5-star read. I can leave that vlog linked in the description as well as the just in case you're interested in watching that before you hear my final wrap-up thoughts. For The Invisible Life of Addie Larue, like I said, I did end up giving this one 3 stars. I felt like this was sort of predictable. I didn't feel anything, which is something I really thought I should feel based on everyone else's sort of talking about it. But in case you did not know, this is about Addie Larue, who is immortal. She makes a deal that keeps her alive forever, but in return, she is not remembered by anyone. So she will literally walk out of the room and then that person who she was in the room with will not remember her. So that's kind of sad. I mean, the concept was sadder than I felt the book was, if I'm being honest. Yeah, it's just about the invisible life of Addie Larue and how she sort of copes with it. So this is told in dual timelines, France 1714 and US, New York 2014, I believe. So the next book that I read for that vlog was The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I think that I gave this one 5 stars. This one made me feel what I wanted to feel. People were describing it as a warm hug and just an all-around good, feel-good type of time, and that's exactly what this was. So this is about a caseworker who is sent to sort of investigate whether or not these magical children are a danger to themselves and to society, and it just gave me everything and more. And honestly, I think that that's all you need. If you haven't read this book yet, that's all you need to know. You don't need to know anymore. Just go into it and love it. And it's, I mean, this was of the 2 of these, I felt more with this one emotion wise than this one. Another impactful and emotional read was The Song of Achilles. This was read for the same vlog. I believe I gave this one 5 stars. This is by Madeline Miller. This is, of course, a retelling of Achilles and his life and his love, and it was so sweet. I did see people mentioning that they wish there was less war and more love. I felt like it was a perfect balance. I felt like this was, I mean, it's basically it is about a boy named Patroclus and Achilles, and they're sort of coming together and Achilles fulfilling the prophecy that was set out for him long before his birth. And of course it changes, and it was just, if you haven't read this book has been out since 2012, and if you haven't read this, please do yourself a favor and pick it up. It was so stunning. It was everything I wanted it to be. I think this was another 5 stars. So for that vlog, we had a 3-star and I think 2 5-stars. I can't remember. I might have given one of them a 4-star. So the next 3 books that I read were for another vlog. This was reading the Goodreads Choice 3 thrillers. I did not read everything on that list. I only picked the ones that were on my shelf already from Book of the Month. And they were The Guest List by Lisa Foley. I believe I gave this one 4 stars. If not, I will put it here. Next book I read for that video was Winter Counts by David Heska Wombley Wyden. And the 3rd book was The Wives by Taryn Fisher. This vlog will be linked in the description as well as in the cards, in case, once again, you were interested in hearing my thoughts before I tell you them. So for The Guest List by Lisa Foley, this was arguably one of the better thrillers that I've read. This was ranked number 1 on the Goodreads Choice Thriller mystery list, and I would have to agree. At least of the ones I read for this video, or this vlog-esque thing. this was about a wedding sort of gone wrong, and we're given that information nearly immediately that this is going to be going wrong on the wedding night. It immediately, we go into the wedding night on the first page. So it sort of sets it up. We have multiple perspectives going in two timelines. The timeline of this one is kind of difficult to explain because we're given the night of, and then we go back to the day before, and then we have more chapters the day before, and then we have another event day of, and then more chapters before, and then another event day of, and then of course it is told in multiple perspectives. We have the bride, we have the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaids. I feel like all you need to know about this book going into it is what is on the back, and it says, an exclusive wedding on a remote Irish island. The bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, the bridesmaid all have a secret. All have motive, but only one is a murderer. And I really enjoyed this one. This was a solid 4-star thriller for me, which, you know, I have yet to find my perfect 5-star. So if we can get a 4-star in there, yes, please. I guess the only thing I did not really sort of love about it is the fact that we're sort of given 5 options on the back. Like the entire time I was reading this, I hadn't yet read the back until about 50% of the way through. I finally did read the back of the book because if you didn't know, I'm someone who likes to go into thrillers knowing almost nothing. I actually like to go into books knowing almost nothing in general. So like I said, I did not read the back, but if I hadn't read the back, I would have pinpointed someone else as the bad guy. So make of that what you will. If you haven't read this book, read it. It was a solid 4-star, at least for me, thriller.
Hi, inserted clip here. I forgot to discuss the trigger warnings for the guest list. So for this one, the trigger warnings are going to be cheating. It's very, very mild, but it is still present, and self-harm. And that one is a sort of a plot point, so be warned.
The next book that I read for that video in the month of March was Winter Counts by David Hesko Wombly Wyden. I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving this book a 3-star, and the reason I did not rate it higher was because this was shelved as mystery thriller, and there was only one thing that was a mystery, but it wasn't really all that much of a mystery, and the only thing that really added to that would have been a plot twist. Of course, I didn't clock it, and I admit to that. It was not a predictable plot twist, but I didn't really get thriller vibes from it. It is an Own Voices book about a man whose name is, oh my gosh, Virgil, and his nephew, it's either Nathan or Nathaniel, I'm sorry. I did read this on audio, so you'd think I would have retained the names better, but alas, I did not. This one was about Virgil, and he's living on the reservation with his nephew, and then we're getting information slowly that there is in fact a drug problem on the reservation, and these drugs are being brought in by somebody on the reservation, and Virgil is kind of a vigilante in that he takes care of problems that the police department and the government in general don't necessarily take care of on the reservation. So he is a vigilante of sorts, getting justice where there isn't otherwise gleaned. So I did enjoy this book. I definitely would have rated it a 4-star if I wasn't given mystery thriller as the genre for this one, but it was once again an Own Voices book. I always love representation, especially Own Voices representation in my books. That is always a plus. Trigger warning for drug use, overdose, and things of that nature with this one. The next book that I begrudgingly read for that vlog was The Wives by Taryn Fisher. If you have not watched my opinion on that, I don't know, but let me sum it up as briefly as I can. The first half of this book would have been a 4 to 5 star. The first half was like a solid setup. We definitely lost, big time lost in the second half. I ended up giving this a 2 star. This could have been so much better than it was. The first half was a 4 to 5. The last half was a 1 to 2 star. I ended up giving it a 2 star because the first half did not do enough to redeem it from the second half. So if you're not somehow familiar about this, I don't want to call it a dumpster fire, but it was a dumpster fire of a novel. It is about a girl named Thursday somehow. I don't know. At no point in time did we mention the name Thursday until she woke up, and it was just a whole, like, I don't want to spoil anything for you if you haven't read this, but like if you haven't read this, is it my recommendation that you do read it? No, unless you like to hate read things, in which case you do you. But this this dumpster fire of a novel, the plot twist just aggravated me and angered me and pissed me off. But this book, if you somehow did not know, is about a woman who is, it's set up as a polygamous relationship where this woman has a husband and her husband has 2 other wives, and they know that they exist, but they don't know any information about each other. They live in different towns. It's a whole thing. It's very clear. Moving on. Trigger warning in here for mental health being used as a plot line. Which is a spoiler, but I really do feel like if you are someone who's going to get triggered by that, best to know. In addition to loss of a baby, and just baby related triggers with this one. So in between reading those 3 books, I did pick up a romance just to sort of palate cleanse. So I ended up reading about half in between the guest list and the wives, because I did read Winter Counts on audio. So I read half in between those 2 books physically, and then I read the other half when I was finished with them. This was, I think I'm going with 4 stars for this one. This is good. Okay, this is a sweet romance. It is about a girl named Chloe Brown who has something occur in her life, and it sort of sets her on this path of trying to have things to flash back on when she does inevitably go to die. And it is about this girl who sort of makes this list, and it says right here on the back the things that she's going to attempt to accomplish, and they are enjoy a drunken night out, ride a motorcycle, go camping, have meaningless but thoroughly enjoyable sex, travel the world with nothing but hand luggage, and do something bad. So what did I really think about this book? I loved it. I loved it. There's nothing else I can say but that I loved it. I mean, I gave it 4 stars, not 5, because I did think that the conflict could have been avoided, but we'll notice a trend in all romance that I read. I just find usually the conflict is stupid and pointless, and I get it. It's like, you know, that's how romances go. It's like flat, and then we have a climax, and then we have a conflict, and it falls, and then we come back together. And I get it, but I didn't love this conflict. Of course, I also didn't love the other conflict, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I did end up enjoying this book a lot more than The Wedding Date. I would definitely recommend this book if you have not read this already. This book is by Talia Hibbert, and I do intend to pick up the other 2 books in this sort of trilogy of companion novels. It is about it's the Brown Sister trilogy, I believe, and it is 1 book per sister in that family. Super cute. I can't wait to pick up the other 2. The next 3 books I read I read 3 thrillers from the Goodreads Choice that were on my shelf from Book of the Month. The first book that I read for that was You Are Not Alone by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. This was a 3 star. I loved the other book that they did, An Anonymous Girl, way more than this one, but this is about a girl who things occur, and I want to get into some trigger warnings real quick. Definite on the trigger warnings for suicide for this one. I can't remember any other off the top of my head. Of course, I will list them if I missed any. But this is about a woman who witnesses a horrible thing, and then the person that she witnesses commit this horrible thing, their friends start popping around her life, and it's like super weird. I would say this book is about a weird friend group. and I didn't really feel like the abnormally large cast of characters was really fleshed out. With thrillers, I feel like we typically get 1, 2, or even 3 perspectives. With this one, we were getting more than that. And contrary to this one, where we were getting at minimum 5 perspectives, these perspectives all felt more fleshed out. I felt like I knew the characters at the end of this, whereas this one, I only really felt like I knew Shay. Of course, Shay was the main character, whereas this one was more like everyone sort of had individual perspectives. This one, Shay was a main character, but I just didn't feel like any of the other characters were fleshed out. I just felt like it was very, I don't want to say convoluted, but I'm going to say it. It was a little much for me, in all the wrong places. It was a little much in every place I didn't want it to be a little much, and not enough in the places that I needed more of. So that was my thoughts on this one. The next 2 books I read were the Sun Down Motel and The Night Swim. I've chosen to talk about these together because their trigger warnings are the same. The trigger warnings for these are going to be sexual assault, rape, attempted sexual assault and rape, attempting to potentially get away with these things, murder a little bit, cancer, loss of a loved one, loss of a sister, loss of a loved one, death, and all that. You know, of course, it's a thriller, so that's sort of like to be expected. So these 2 got jumbled in my head a little bit because I listened to this one on audio while I physically read this one. So I talked about it in my vlog, which I will of course leave in the or in the description, or both. I did talk about this at length in that one, but I will go ahead and say here that reading this one on audio was definitely the better choice because it has the podcast element, and that felt very real at times when I was listening to it. It was almost like sort of jarring to come out of the podcast and into one of the characters' perspectives. So this is told with 3 perspectives, one of them of course being the podcast, one of them being Rachel, and one of them being Hannah. So I'm going to talk about this one a little bit before I move into this one. This one is about Rachel, who does a podcast called Guilty or Not Guilty. So we're getting Rachel's perspective, the podcast, as well as Hannah. And Hannah is a girl who lost her sister many years ago. She is convinced it was murder and something foul was at play, whereas the town that she grew up in is not convinced. And then with Rachel, she is investigating a alleged rape, and we're following the trial for that live as it's happening, and she is reporting that for her podcast. So we are sort of getting a 2-for-1 in this one. Well, 3-for-1 if you count the podcast. We're getting 2 crimes and learning about the 2 crimes as well as the podcast. This was I think I'm going to give this one 4 stars. Pretty sure I did give this one 4 stars. And then this one I physically read, and like I said, all the same trigger warnings. This one is told in dual timelines. We have Viv Delaney in 1982 and Carly Clerk in 2017. Viv Delaney is a girl who just happened into this town, and she grabs a position. She works the front desk of the Sun Down Motel, and one day she goes missing. And many years down the line, we have Carly Kirk, who goes to sort of see what happened. How did her aunt disappear? And along the way, she sort of finds herself stepping into her aunt's shoes. There was one thing I did not like about this book, but if I told you, it would be a spoiler alert, so I'm not going to say that. But I definitely recommend this book. As I said, it's told in dual timelines, so we have sort of Viv going through these things, and then in present day we have Carly going through the same things, and they're sort of discovering things along the same timetable. So that was definitely interesting. Though I will say, if you intend to read both of these, definitely read them farther apart than I did. Do not read them at the same time, because I ended up reading them, I ended up having to mentally separate them by going, this one has ghosts. Oh, it does have ghosts in it, by the way. And this one is a podcast. So I was having to separate them that way because their trigger warnings are the same, and because the things that happen in this book are in these books are sort of similar with the trigger warnings. It was definitely sort of something I had to mentally continually remind myself that this one was about ghosts and this one was the courtroom podcast. So that was that. The next book I read was The Last Train to Key West, and this is the third of 4, I believe, so far. We have one coming out sometime in May this year. It is the Why We Left Cuba, or When We Left Cuba, the Cuba companion novels, and this is by Chanel Clayton. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that name right, and I'm sorry if I'm not. But this book was the third book, and it was, usually these books, the first 2 were told in dual timelines where we were having present day and then like the events leading up to why this certain family left Cuba. I will have to go back and sort of take notes and listen to or reread. I did end up reading this one physically in one sitting during an overnight. It was pretty short, like 290 pages. It wasn't even 300 pages. So I finished it during an overnight shift. I really enjoyed this. I will, like I said, have to go back and reread the other ones and see, because the first 2 were about sisters and the family, and this one I don't even know. This one is about 3 women whose paths cross in 1935 in Key West during a hurricane, and things happen, and basically most of this book is told in like 2 or 3 days, and then it's not really until the end, until we have a chapter a couple weeks later, and then the final chapter I think months later. This was I think I'm gonna give this 3 to 4 stars. 3.5, maybe 4 stars. I definitely like the first 2 in this companion novel series more than this one, but this one is it's historical fiction, in case you haven't gathered. But I like the other ones more, and I don't typically like historical fiction, which surprises me that I like actively looked for this book in bookstores, but I did end up enjoying it. It definitely kept my mind busy during the overnight, and I will be picking up the 4th book in this companion series by Chanel Clayton. So the final book I read in the month of March wasn't necessarily the final book I picked up, but it was the final book that I finished. I ended up starting this one during an overnight in between You Are Not Alone and the Sun Down Motel. This one is called The Right Swipe by Alicia Ray. We're gonna see a common theme with romance. I typically like romance novels, but I always have a problem with how stupid the conflict is. I do want to mention that this is more of a 3-star romance for me, because I felt like the main character, Rhiannon, was very selfish. Granted, she had been through some trauma, so I understood why she was selfish, but our couple, Rhiannon and Samson was just so giving and so willing to work it out and figure out what it was she needed and give her anything she needed. And arguably that's what women want, is someone who is able to make the distinction of what we want, you know? I mean, I don't know, but I just felt like Rhiannon was just so selfish. But this is a book about Rhiannon, who is the owner of a company called Crush, which is a dating app in which we use swiping as a method to flip between potential love interests, and Samson, who is a former NFL player. And we are getting this in both perspectives, Rhiannon and Samson. They did cross paths in the past, and then things occurred, and they did not have any communication, and they're sort of thrown together at a convention for dating websites or something like that. I'm not sure. But all of the conflict arguably most romance conflicts are just a misunderstanding. But with this one, I could not wrap my head around it. Like, none of the conflict was Samson's fault. It was all Rhiannon just being so much. And I get it. She has trauma. I get it. Absolutely understand. Trigger warning for gaslighting and just all around being a douchebag by her ex. But I don't think that trauma can be used as an excuse to just absolutely disregard the feelings of others. Obviously, if you experience trauma, everyone handles it differently, and I'm definitely not the spokesperson on how to handle trauma in a relationship, but I just felt like in this particular novel, her trauma was used so much as the conflict and why things were rocky throughout, because this was not that sort of classic arc like we have where we're, you know, getting together and we're falling in love and then we just have that nasty falling out conflict and then we come back together. This book was very much like this, and I get it, that's how life is, but I just felt like she was too selfish at some points, and too unwilling to see past things. I will continue on in the series because I did like her writing, and my God, Samson, I love him so much. But that was the final book that I completed in the month of March. The final book I want to talk to you about for the month of March is Mark Z. Danielewski's The House of Leaves. This is a 700 something page chunker, and that doesn't even include the first couple pages, which are Roman numerals. So I ended up reading about 15 or 16 pages, but I only got to page 4. I just couldn't. This is so dense and so thick and so hefty. I just didn't really know at points what the point of me reading it was, and like I said, I only got to page 4, even though that's really like 20-ish pages, maybe 15, 17, I don't know, let's see. I read this much of this book, and this is not a hard DNF, and what I mean by hard DNF is, am I never ever gonna pick this up again? No, I do anticipate potentially picking it up again, maybe continuing from where I left off, because I don't think I could read that prologue again. I just don't. But this is a soft DNF. This is, I could not deal with it this month at this time. This was not a never ever again. So that is the final book I want to talk to you about in the month of March. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you like me and would like to see more from me, please hit subscribe. I would be so happy to have you. Alright, I hope that you are being safe, washing your hands, taking care of yourselves. Bye guys.